Morning, everybody. An absolute pleasure to be back here as always. A slightly sombering topic, but I think it's something that does unfortunately bear a very strong relevance today. And it starts really with a story from 2014 that somebody told me. Somebody told me that there was a group of, I think it was young boys. They were walking through central London, and this was at the time of the 2014 Israel-Gaza conflict, round one, whatever. And there were these, sorry. Exactly. And there were these thugs that approached these young boys wearing a Palestinian flag. And they said to these young boys who were Jewish, "Are you Jewish?" So these boys decided that the correct answer in this case was no. So they said no. And then they did probably the most Jewish thing possible after they said, "But if we had said we were Jewish, what would you have done?" Which like should have given the game away immediately. And these thugs said, "Well, we would have killed you." That's what they said. So the question is, I'm asking, did they do the right thing? Is that the right thing to do to say no? There's a few mumbles. Yeah, of course, 100%. Famously, who hid their Jewish identity? This is very famous. Very good. Wow, you got it way quicker than in Bushing. You go Esther famously hid her Jewish identity. So I have these source sheets if we could just distribute. And the problem with what seems very straightforward as far as we're concerned is if you look at the Shulchan Aruch in Yoredea 1572, the Shulchan Aruch says, Al Eza Averis Yehareg Vayav. What are the Averis, these prohibitions that one should rather be killed rather than transgress? One of them, says the Shulchan Aruch, Osel Adam Loima. It is forbidden for a person to say Shehu Oved Kechavim, that he is a non-Jew, Kedei Shelo Yeharguhu, in order that he shouldn't be killed. So, straight into source number one, the Shulchan Aruch says straight out, it is on pain of death prohibited to say that you are not a Jew, and you should rather be killed than deny the fact you're Jewish. And this complicates things somewhat. And I brought in here source two, that seemingly Esther was very much somebody who would fit around our table in that she also hid her Jewish identity. So there's clearly a discussion that we need to unearth here about, can one actually deny the fact that they're Jewish? So if we look at source number three, which is a Mishnah in Avodah Zarah, the Mishnah says the following thing: Lo yitzis isha imohen. A Jewish lady, is forbidden to seclude herself with non-Jewish men because they are suspected of engaging in immoral acts. And a Jewish man, cannot be secluded with non-Jews because they are suspected of murder. Now, this should ring some alarm bells with us. It seems to be a little bit inconsistent. Women are not allowed to be secluded with non-Jews because there's immoral behaviors that might happen. Men are not allowed to be secluded with non-Jews because they might get killed. Now, in a world of equality of opportunity, I would say that why are we dividing the worst case scenarios between men and women? Surely women are just as likely to get killed as men. So why are we saying that women we're concerned about immoral behavior, but men we're concerned that they might get killed? Now, just a caveat, I would say fairly confidently that this does not apply today. We're talking about a far more barbarous and savage world where non-Jews were, unfortunately, far more depraved than some very upstanding non-Jews that we know today. And, there's various halachas that really speak to the degree of violence that was just commonplace in the world. For example, one of the halachas what we say is that a Jewish person should not get a haircut from a non-Jewish person because they might just slit their throat. It's just like, oops, sorry. Who's next? Clean up on aisle 3, please. This happened again. So this was like a savage world, and I don't think we would say this applies today. But there is a principle that we're going to try and draw out from here, and that is that, well, it starts with the question of why, when it comes to men, are we worried about murder, but when it comes to women, we're worried about immorality. It's not my question. The Yerushalmi, the Gemara, Yerushalmi and Avodah Zarah, source number 4, ask this question: all of a sudden, women don't get killed. Men were worried about getting killed. Women, now it's going to be immorality. Women don't get killed all of a sudden. So there's two answers here. Omer Rabbi Ami said, Tipote bivriya. We should answer this case of the lady who's not going to get killed as referring to a bria. What exactly this means seems to be a strong, powerful lady, I've included here pictures of two, well, whom I consider to be, at least in the first instance, strong, powerful ladies. Last time I was here, we had Baruch Mendoza, who everybody identified instantaneously. Decided to up the ante a bit. Anybody know who either of these two ladies are, who we would refer to as Tipote Bivria? Very good. So we have arguably the easy one. We have Boudica on the right-hand side here. And then everyone says Boudicca. I'm never quite, you always get Boudica and then you get Boudicca. Does anybody now have any guidelines for me on how to pronounce this going forward? It's Boudica. How my listener says Boudica. Right, Boudica. Sack, done. So Boudica. Does anyone know who the other one is? It's a bit, I'll give you a clue. 1930s-ish America. Nope. Nope. This is a lady called Kate Barker, commonly referred to as Ma Barker. She was head of the, or she was allegedly the head of the Barker Carpus gang. Now, this is like an interesting story. She was portrayed for decades. She was described, when she was shot in a shootout, she was described by President Hoover as being the most vicious, dangerous, and resourceful criminal brain of the last decade. I think that claim to criminal fame got slightly outdone in the 1930s somewhat. But at one point anyway, she was considered to be this vicious criminal. And she was portrayed as such in lots of stories and films afterwards. It turns out that really she wasn't all that involved at all in the gang. And they portrayed her as this mafia boss who ran the gang. It turns out after they had shot her, they needed some sort of vindication to shooting her, the FBI. So they sort of upped her role in things a little bit, made this massive smear campaign that she was this mastermind to sort of justify shooting her after the fact. Anyway, as it stands in the 1930s, it seemed, at some point she commanded a great degree of respect and fear. And so these sorts of people, if they were secluded with non-Jewish people, perhaps they wouldn't be murdered because they are potentially awesome figures, but they may be subject to immoral behavior. And the Bavli in this Gemara says, well, maybe she's related to the royal family, or she's got some powerful relatives. They're not going to kill her. Maybe they'll just do something horrible to her. That's all Rabbi Ami's answer. Rabbi Ami says the reason why we're worried about women being in morality is obviously women can get killed, but even if women aren't on pain of death for whatever reason, there is some other awful outcome that might happen. Rabbi Abin says a different answer, and this is slightly controversial in terms of what we're discussing. Rabbi Abin says, well, it's very simple. A woman might not get killed because she's going to say, I'm not Jewish. And if she says, I'm not Jewish, she's removed that consequence of death. But there's still a concern of immorality. So the Mishnah, on identifying the problems with a lady being secluded, has only identified immorality because there's an easily avoidable outcome of death by just saying she's not Jewish. This should be concerning because the Shulchan Aruch has said that you're not allowed to say you're not Jewish to save yourself from death. So how can Rabbi Abin, or maybe the question should be, where does Shulchan Aruch get this from? The Gemara seems to explicitly say that a woman is allowed to lie, save herself from death, and say, I'm not Jewish. As opposed to why men who can't hide themselves, says Rabbi Abin continues, but a man can't hide himself and say that he is a non-Jew. And on source number 5, the Pnei Moshe explains that the reason why this is because a lady can hide and conceal herself and say she's non-Jew, as opposed to a man who everyone recognizes as Jewish by his hair and beard. So there's clearly, you weren't pulling a fast one on any non-Jews, as you were this visibly Hasidish-looking gentleman claiming that your name is, I don't know, Patrick from Berkhamsted. It's like, no, that's not going to happen. Other Mefarshim say that it's not actually the hair and the beard that make a man recognizable, it's actually the bris milah. It's interesting today, I don't think either of those, either hair or beard or bris milah, are particular indicators that anybody's Jewish. Lots of people, the royal family famously have bris milah and circumcision, and lots of people grow their hair out even though they're not Jewish, and lots of people who are Jewish are clean shaven and don't have visible payas per se. So these are just, it's interesting to see how the Jewish identification has changed somewhat. But as it stands, we have a Shulchan Aruch who's seemingly coming out of left field and saying, on pain of death, it is utterly forbidden to say that you are a non-Jew in order to save yourself, and you should die rather than admit that. Now we have Esther, who hid herself. We have Rabbi Abin from the Yerushalmi, who says ladies can definitely hide themselves and claim that they're non-Jews and avoid being killed. So the Shulchan Aruch seems to be up against, firstly, Esther, and secondly, a Yerushalmi. That is not a good position for the Shulchan Aruch to be. And as it stands, we may well have our lads in central London facing these Palestinian thugs to be on safe territory. They denied that they were Jewish, and yeah, 100%. So the Rosh comes in as source number 6. The Rosh isn't having any of this. And the Rosh says, Ein ledakdik mikani. Don't try and say, based on this Yerushalmi, where the lady hid her Jewish identity rather than be killed, that it's permitted for a Jew to say that he is a non-Jew. The Rosh is not having any of it. Yes, we have a Gemara that seems to say that a woman can hide herself and say she's not Jewish. The Rosh says, don't try and infer from here that this is permitted practice. You're denying fundamentals of Judaism, since they'd rather kill you if you don't switch to their religion. Then definitely when you say you're a non-Jew, you admit to their religion, and you are accepting their deity on yourself. Oh, but what about the case in the Yerushalmi, where we had this lady in source number 4 who was hiding herself rather than be killed? When the Gemara says, why isn't a lady concerned about being killed? We're bringing a way out of this situation that maybe there won't be a case of shvichas damim if she says, I am not Jewish. Don't say that it's permitted to do this. Rather, this is something one might do. Now, this Rosh is a tad uncomfortable. What he's saying here is, yes, we have a Yerushalmi when this lady says, I'm not Jewish and gets saved. He's saying that Yerushalmi is actually following a case of a lady who is doing the wrong thing. It just is something she might do. She might try and get out of it by saying she's not Jewish. In which case, had she done the wrong thing, denied she was Jewish, there is still a concern of immorality. Now, this is not a typical halachic approach. We like to create halachic parameters for behavior in a world where everybody's doing the right thing. A common phrase used in the Gemara is Otu Burashii Oskinon. All of a sudden, we're dealing with wicked people. We have to assume that Jews are going to follow the right thing to do. So to have a halachic precedent which is based on somebody doing the wrong thing is a very unusual halachic principle. Nonetheless, the Shulchan Aruch is clearly going like the Rosh. The Shulchan Aruch is saying that it's forbidden to deny you're Jewish, and you should rather be killed than do so. And that he's rejecting this Gemara in the Yerushalmi of this lady who denies being Jewish as somebody doing the wrong thing. Interestingly, the Gra does not go with the Rosh. The Gra seemingly disagrees with the Rosh. He is very uncomfortable about setting up this Yerushalmi as being a case where a lady is doing the wrong thing. And seemingly, according to the Gra, there is no question whatsoever. You can happily deny that you're Jewish. There is no prohibition of doing so. And he brings a proof from the simple reading of source number 4 in the Yerushalmi, and that's what the Gra says. However, the Rosh and the Shulchan Aruch, who are definitely mainstream, more mainstream halachic approaches, are still saying, forget it. You have to rather die than deny you're Jewish. Now, I've glossed over somewhat the tenet that the Rosh is working with. The Rosh is working, and the Gemara and the Shulchan Aruch, they're working in a society, if you read the Rosh carefully, where by denying you're Jewish, you're by default buying into another religion. We're talking in a world where everybody was religious. So if you are in a default Christian country, like England, let's say, 500 years ago, everybody's Christian. There's just no two ways about it. Therefore, by denying you're Jewish, you are implicitly stating you are Christian. That's the world that they're talking about. And you see the Torah says it specifically in source number 7. It's forbidden for a person to say that they're a non-Jew in order they shouldn't kill him. Why? Since he says he is a non-Jew, you are admitting to their religion. Let's pretend it's Christianity. You are admitting to Christianity and denying Jewish principles for the sake of idolatrous ones. That's what's all implied. That's all built into saying you're not Jewish. In that world, as soon as you say you're not Jewish, you are automatically an idol worshipper of some sort. The question is, does this happen today? Seemingly, if you say you're not Jewish, that does not give any indication that you are an idol worshiper or even religious at all. Rav Berkovitz said, he said it in a serious way. He said, you get Jews who don't believe in God and non-Jews who believe in God. Like you get this. So saying you're Jewish actually may not be any indication that you believe in Hashem at all. And saying that you're non-Jewish may actually mean that you are a fervent believer in Hashem. So in today's day and age, it would seem that denying you're Jewish doesn't have the same weight that everyone's concerned about in the Shulchan Aruch and the Rosh. Nonetheless, it seems to be that the poskim, the modern day authorities, are very uncomfortable going against an explicit Shulchan Aruch. And we have the Ramah in source number 8, and he says, even though it's forbidden to say you're a non-Jew, you can say something that could, is ambiguous. I would ask you to consider whether the cat in the picture is going up or down the stairs. This cat is trying to deny he's Jewish. They said, go up the stairs if you're Jewish. Anyway, he can say something that's ambiguous. The non-Jews will think that he's saying he's a non-Jew, and he's actually has something else in mind completely. And similarly, if you're just allowed to, if you can just mislead them, that they think that they think you're a non-Jew, sorry, this is also mutter. And there are some enthralling examples of how people have got their way around this. The first one, the Ramah, is actually coming from the Gemara in the Dorim, where there was a tax collector who was overstepping his mark, and it was just turning into robbery. And he decided to direct his thieving drive at the Jews. So he was going around asking you if you're a Jew, and if you're a Jew, he'd just double your tax for no reason. So he asked the Jew, this is in the Gemara, he asked the Jew, are you Jewish? And this Jew said, Uvda denahara ani, I am a worshipper of the fire. Now, this non-Jew thought that he was saying that he worships fire as an idol, and left him alone. But this Jew actually had in mind that as we describe Hashem as an eish eichlot, a consuming fire. So he says, I'm a worshipper of the fire, referring to a term described to describe Hashem. And this non-Jew thought that he was referring to a fire as an idol in of itself. And the Torah Chaim, who is quite an early source, says he heard of the story of somebody in Germany, in the German region, who was asked if he was Jewish by some thugs. And this, he describes him as a chocham echad, a one wise person, who replied to these thugs who had asked if he was Jewish, saying, Kain Yuda, which in German means, I'm not a Jew. But they didn't realize he was actually speaking Hebrew and saying, Kain Yuda, yes, I am a Jew. So if you can use this, this seems to be the approach. If you can do some misleading turn of phrase, a particular favorite of mine that somebody in the Bush Youth Service actually goes, saying, I ain't no Jew. Now, it is unlikely that such an anti-Semitic thug is going to pick up on your grammatical swerve there, particularly as it's probably early in the morning and after a few drinks. And he's not going to realize that you've switched the double negative on him and you're declaring loud and proud that you are a Jew. But he, with his obviously expansive education and knowledge of English literature, is probably not going to pick that up. And so that would be another way around it. Finally, I just want to, there's one more example here, but I just want to say, when it comes to the Holocaust, it seems, and this is actually very relevant today. When it comes to the Holocaust, there was the Rav Sharafansky, who is one of, again, another more modern day halakhic authority. He says, he say, Rabbim v'shleimim, these good and great people during the Holocaust freely denied they were Jewish the whole time, just explicitly. And he says, well, how can it be? The Shulchan Aruch seemingly says that you shouldn't really do this. And he says the Holocaust was different. In the Holocaust, they didn't care whether you were a practicing Jew or not. It was more almost like, for lack of a better word, a genetic thing. Now, you could have been 3 generations Christian. You go to church every Sunday. They didn't care. They were going to cart you off and kill you, whether you believed in their religion or not. There was no religious affiliation to what they were doing. As a result, since the concern is built on you rejecting Jewish principles and trading it in for idolatrous one, in the case of the Nazis, but they don't care what you believe in. You could believe in Buddha, you could believe in Hashem, you could believe in, I don't know, the worm at the bottom of the garden. Like they literally don't care. As a result, it doesn't make a difference whether you say yes or no, and you are allowed to freely deny your Judaism, because inbuilt in that is not a denial or acceptance of Jewish practice at all. And I would suggest that although it may have been better for the thugs, so for the Jewish people to have answered those thugs wearing the Palestinian flag, "Are you Jewish?" with an ambiguous answer, when it comes to the Palestinian conflict, they don't care whether you're from or not either. They really fundamentally care whether you align with their political idea. It's not a religious question. Fundamentally, it's a political one. So to deny that you're Jewish in such a case is not as much of a statement of your Jewish observance or belief as much as your political ideology. If you had said, yes, I am Jewish, but I belong to the Ture Carter, there'd have been hugs and smiles all around. So as a result, it's an unfortunate truth. So as a result, for them to deny to a Palestinian who wants to hurt you that you're Jewish is probably not a religious statement or question at all, more of a political one. So I think that would also be probably okay to say that you're not Jewish. Finally, Rav Eliashiv does say that he's talking about a case of somebody who goes into a hospital and he's worried that if he says he's Jewish, he's going to get a lower level of treatment. They're going to treat him in a more maybe casual or not do their due diligence. Are you allowed to, in that case, deny that you're Jewish in order to receive better treatment in a hospital? And Rav Eliashiv does say that the case of the Shulchan Aruch is talking about where by denying your Judaism, you'd be accepting another religion on yourself. That doesn't apply so much today. So he says, pikuach nefesh. If your life is at stake, then you can freely deny you're Jewish, because we don't really find that you're accepting another religion on today. However, there was an interesting case that somebody asked Rabbi of a girl who was being bullied in a public school because she's Jewish. Now, for a different reason entirely, she's moving to a different public school in America. And she wants to know, can she deny that she's Jewish to avoid being bullied again in the new school? So this isn't a case of pikuach nefesh that Rav Eliashiv has said, that in the hospital, you can deny you're Jewish to get better treatment for pikuach nefesh. It's just a case of, are you going to have an uncomfortable 7 years? Maybe a school bag will get thrown around. So Rav Berkowitz says it's not so simple just to go against something that Shulchan Aruch says is your horog v'yavar, to die rather than transgress. So he says, try and get round it in these interesting ways. You can say something that is ambiguous. You can do things to lead them to believe that you're not Jewish. So Berkowitz says that his great uncle saved himself in World War II by dressing up in Nazi uniform. These sorts of things that just lead everybody to assume that you're not Jewish, these things are okay. But unless it's pikuach nefesh, it really seems that to outright deny your Judaism is something that we don't do. And I think it says a lot to the degree of the strength that we and fervor we should have that is associated with our Jewish identity. It's not something that we should just dispense with at the earliest convenience. Was it last week or 2 weeks ago when Lovon runs out the house when Eliezer showed up and he says, "Ponisi es habayis," I've cleared the house. And obviously, if you're accepting guests, you clean the house. So I saw a beautiful explanation. Well, Rashi said, sorry, that when it says Ponisi es habayis, I cleared the house, it means I cleared the house of idol worship. I've tried to make you feel at home. And I saw a beautiful point about this, how tragic this is. That these are his gods, the things that he worships and holds as ultimate deities. And as soon as somebody wealthy has shown up that he needs to impress, he just discards his gods. Ponisi otherwise, sorry gods, I'll see you later. I've got some rich guests coming round. I'm going to bring you in. I'll bring you in when it's useful. This is not the way we treat Hashem. Hashem's with us. Hashem is part of our core identity and not something that we'll freely dispense with when the need arises. So bottom line is, if somebody asks that you're Jewish and there is no threat to life, try and get round it in an ambiguous way. I ain't no Jew is one of them. Or if you're speaking to a German speaker, you can say Kaim Yuda and have in mind that you're speaking Hebrew. But if there is a genuine threat to life, seeing as we're not going to be accepting an alternative deity on ourselves by doing so, you can, worst case scenario, deny that you're Jewish.
Got a couple of one or two questions. Yeah.
2 points. Number one, Spanish Inquisition happened before the Shulchan Aruch was written.
Yes.
And Jews were, yes, pretending to be Christians, but in secret they kept whatever they could keep. Point one. So that's a precedent before the Shulchan Aruch.
Yes.
And point number 2, what about the dictum of Ochai Bohem?
Yeah, very good point. Just as far as the Spanish Inquisition is concerned, the Shulchan Aruch isn't inventing this idea. I mean, obviously, this is a concept that goes all the way back to the Gemara. So the Yerushalmi talks about denying you're Jewish, and then you have the Rosh, who's obviously the Shulchan Aruch. I mean, even in the Spanish Inquisition, if you could just dress up as a Christian, you know, the Gemara speaks about dressing up as a religious leader, similar to walking around in a Nazi uniform. If you can do that, there's nothing wrong with doing that. You're allowed to mislead people and then maintain your Jewish identity in private. So the Spanish Inquisition may have very halachically permissible ways of doing that. And in terms of V'chai Bohem does apply, apart from 3 averos, and that's obviously Shvich Matam and Gidorais and Avodah Zarah. So in these environments where denying your Judaism would mean that you accepted by default another religion on yourself, that would constitute idol worship and therefore would be an exception to the rule of V'chai Bohem. So V'chai Bohem is definitely there, apart from these 3 averos, and denying you're Jewish may fall into the Avodah Zarah.
Right. We're running out of time, so we'll have one.
The pasuk says in Esther, "Ein Esther magedes moiladata." She didn't say where she was from. At no point did she say she was non-Jewish. She just said, I'm not telling you. Secret. Surprise. So as a result, she falls in line definitely with the Ramah. The Ramah who has said that you can do an ambiguous thing. That's 100% okay. Esther wasn't even bending any rules here. She was asked, but Ein Magedes. She didn't say. So you would ask me where you're from. Are you Jewish? In this case, yeah, I understand. Thank you for bringing that back. Yeah,
okay, thank you very much. That was very, very. Thank you very much. I'll say goodbye to those on Zoom, and we will see you next week. And I'll do the